Good evening, everyone. My name is Pedro. Today I want to read to you a book by H.P. Lovecraft, or at least stories of H.P. Lovecraft. There it is. Um, and I recently bought it in a shop, and I wanted to read it to YouTube, practice some editing skills, some softwares, whilst also practicing some voice work. So let's do this. Let's see if we can learn something from this. Um, if it teaches us something about ourselves. And yeah, I don't expect anything professional from me, at least for now. This is just a hobby. So yeah, let's do this. Right. So, the Necronomicon. Okay. Lovecraft opened the way for me as he had done for others before me, said Stephen King. The best weird tales of H.P. Lovecraft. Let's see. It begins with several stories, as I understand. It begins with it includes at least the poetical works of Jonathan. Ah, no, it's not includes. It's also by H.P. Lovecraft. I see. I don't know. So what does this book have? Well, it has some images. I'll show you this one. And some acknowledgements about the people who were consulted to write this book, including H.P. Lovecraft. This makes sense. But content. It starts with the Night Gouts and ends with Afterworld, A Gentleman of Providence by Stephen Jones. Fair enough. And yeah, in memory of August Derleth and Donald Wandrei for keeping the nightmares alive. I see. So, let's begin with the Night Gouts. Gouts. I wonder what the count means. Out of what crypt they crawl, I cannot tell. But every night I see the rubbery things, black, horned, and slender, with membranous wings. They come in legions on the north wind's swell, with obscene clutch that titillates and stings, snatching me off on monstrous voyagings to grey worlds hidden deep in nightmare's well. Over the jagged peaks of Thok they sweep, heedless of all the cries I try to make, and down the nether pits of that foul lake where the puffed shaggeth splash in doubtful sleep. But ho, if only they would make some sound, or wear a face where faces should be found. See, well, from this little poem and from the image here, I think what H.P. Lovecraft is trying to do is trying to personalize or give a more understandable image to nightmares, or at least the 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 the, the nirvana between going to bed and nightmares. So if anyone is going to bring you into a nightmare, it's the night couch. It's these guys. Which is interesting, because then that means, from what I understand from H.P. Lovecraft, that he is simply just trying to identify something that he doesn't understand. I think that I've probably heard someone describe him like this before, surely. Honestly, it makes sense. Whenever you find yourself in a new situation, you try to identify what you can, and then go from there. And if you can't, then maybe you're upon the situation of you find yourself in a new world where you have to come up with the terms and with the concepts if you find a new type of bird that doesn't do anything that any other bird does, you have to come up with a whole new name, and then give, well, names to the things that it does. Interesting. So, let's start with Dagon, which is the first proper text. Dagon. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes my life endurable, I cannot bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this carriage window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled papers, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific. Sorry, I'll repeat the sentence, the paragraphs. It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that a packet, of which I was supercargo, fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great Wall was then at its very beginning, and the ocean's forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of our crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due to us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, when I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awakened, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder or at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified and astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that I can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within the hearing, and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with nauseating fear. Yet the completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with the nauseating. Wait, what? Okay, so here, was in a boat, got caught. He managed to escape. It was adrift, landed in a shore. The shore was full of black slime and putrid, uh, decaying fish. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. See, I mean, if even if you're not uh, sailing aimlessly in the middle of the ocean for days, and then find yourself in this situation. To be fair, if suddenly you just see blackness and blackness again from the whole scene, I can imagine both the skyscape and the black beach and the I don't know the dark parts of the rest of the island. Everything's just homogeneous. Must have been, as he describes, oppressive. I see. No, fair enough. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty. Jesus. As though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean. Strain my ears as I might, nor was there any sea fowl to prey upon the dead things. I see. Okay. All right. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness, and it seemed likely to dry sufficiently for travelling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water. Oh, I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. What? Wait. Oh, fuck. He's not near a shore. He's in the middle of an island that just spawned out of nowhere. Oh, right. That changes things. Jesus. All right. Where's the sharks? Where's the whales, if any? I mean, he mentions fish, but all right, fair enough. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind this so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. Whoa, a black desert in the middle of what you think is still the ocean. Oh, that's pretty awesome. Um, which rose higher than the. No. That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from the distance, an intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. The intervening valley setting in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild at night, but here the waning, uh, but here the waning and fantastical Gibbon's moon. What the fuck? Sorry about it. I know not why my dreams were so wild at night, but here the waning and fantastical Gibbon's moon had risen far above the eastern plain. I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon, I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down to the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recess the moon had not yet soared high enough to illuminate. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into the unfathomless, peering over the rim into a peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscence of Paradise Lost and Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon is comparing himself to Satan, as the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I could not definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. What the fuck is a Stygian deeps? Alright, I guess I'll look this up later. Let me just write this down somewhere. There we go. Okay. Alright, so he is in the desert. He decided to climb the tallest mounds he could find. And then when he got there, he just sees a huge hole or canyon on the other side. Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contours and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, wading and out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope, What the hell is that? So, across the chasm, I don't know. I don't think. Okay, let me let me go back a second. The moon, now near the zenith, shone wearily and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Is he fucking surrounded by water? What the shit is happening? What does this mean? Oh man, whatever. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith. Oh fuck, there is water. What the hell is happening? On whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphs unknown to me, and unlike anything I had ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventional aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean rising plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most of the. Sorry. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size was an array of bas reliefs, whose bas reliefs. What? Array of bas reliefs, whose subject would have excited the envy of a Dore. Alright, let's find out what the Dore is. Dore, with the accents on the E? Alright. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the water of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine, which appeared to be under the waves as well. It's pretty funny whenever I think of fishmen. I always have two images in my head: either a very goofy version of it, or a very like disturbing version of it. It's either like a fish with human legs and a huge carp mouth and two giant eyes on the side, or it's a relatively more human look with like just menacing look with a horizontal mouth, two front eyes that just are looking for flesh, and all of it is full of scales and watery and filled with those weird hands that they have, like those enemies from Fallout. I forgot the names, but yeah, it's interesting, and both of those run my head every time I think of fish people, and yeah. Fishes in the water of the marine grotto, or paying homage to the monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. On their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Jesus. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer, they were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. So he did recall. Oh, I don't want to because I might find proceeds to describe what it is. What the hell is a Poe and Bulwer? Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale represented as a little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, with their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before their first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at his unexpected glimpse into the past beyond the conception of the most dating anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. I don't know. I mean, if suddenly we are to be blessed, let's say, with anthropological findings that date way before what is common knowledge or what's to be expected, then yeah, it will be weird. Yeah, it's pretty funny how these types of books and these types of thinking nature outside the box uh, expand the box, and suddenly becomes quite normal to think about this. I can imagine when someone would be reading something like this years ago, they would find this amazing and weird and disturbing and almost gag at the mere thought of this. But now I think everyone is kind of, uh, well, used to this. Just finds this rather banal. I'm not saying that this is banal reading. Far from it. This is very interesting reading, um, which means that it worked. You know, whatever H.P. Lovecraft was trying to do. If anything else, you could say that he was trying to normalize thinking weirdly. It worked. Now this is not so weird anymore. Thinking about these things. And if you do think about them and they upset you, you can find someone else who also thought about it. It's not new anymore, which is an example of how human progression actually works. um, hmm. Then suddenly I saw it, with only a slight coloring churning to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters, vast, Polyphemus-like, and loathsome. It darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of the frantic accent of the sloping cliff, and my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm, and some time after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I hear peals of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in the wildest moods. When I came about out of the shadows, I was in the San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of my land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought a celebrated anthologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god. But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account of the formation or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow man. Often I find myself it if it is sorry. Often I ask myself if it could not only beg your pardon. Often I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I asked myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. But ever does there come... I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likeness on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst an universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window! I take it all back. It's pretty good. Should have just kept reading. The thing is, you could think, in theory, you could imagine everything that you see is a dream. And therefore, nothing is real, right? If you believe that, you can also, therefore, conclude that nothing is real. Which helps a lot if you do find something fucked up like this. Because if you find something that disturbs you a lot, you can just pretend that it's part of the imaginary. Even if you, the healthy thing is, I suppose, psychology speaking, is to know that it's true, but still deal with it. But if you cannot at all, example of this fella, which we don't know the name, and we cannot say that. No, he should assume, for his mental, well-being, that it was not true. It was a dream, a phantasm, as you put it, and be okay with the idea that there might be or might not be monsters in the deep sea. But the same token, I can't imagine myself being in a situation like his and not be scarred for life. It's very interesting because when you do something, there is the opportunity cost of not doing something else. Which means that every time you're in your quietness, in your quiet moments, and every time you're doubtful, and you want to think back of some story that can help you with such a situation, if all those stories are fucked up and you can't escape that, even if you brand them as fantastical and not real, they're still only things that you can think of. Well, unless you do some heavy work on your mentality first. So, basically, this story, Dagon, is about trauma, perhaps? Well, among other things, I suppose. About how if it consumes you, then you might delve into, in this case, drugs, and then you consume white drugs, which doesn't help with your first situations, and then it just spirals out of control. So, yeah, interesting. Well, something to think about. I hope you enjoyed, and have a good day.